For those of you who follow the channel, the Deep 404 is back. I had some time off. I ended up getting sick a few months ago and sort of burned out a bit. My situation has now changed. I've got some more time, so I'm back with the channel. This is the first episode back. It's a really special and interesting one. For those of you in the ex-Twitter sphere who follow the Ukraine conflict and following Israel, you'll know AMK Mapping. If you don't, check out AMK Mapping and subscribe to his Twitter feed. He joins me on this show. Just so you're aware where he was calling from, he didn't have a video camera, so he's audio only. But this is a fun episode. Hopefully, AMK and I will do some more in the future, some of these, maybe, and get a little bit more into the detail of what happened. This was the first time we'd ever met. So there was a bit of a background conversation, but I think going forward, we might look at doing some sort of like a weekly or semi-regular roundup of what's happening globally. Anyhow, yep, I've missed you guys. Enjoy this episode. Nice to have you on the show. As a little bit of a background from me, I have the Deep 404 channel. I started, I don't know, probably a year and a bit ago, doing videos about primarily Ukraine and then Israel as that conflict sort of heated up. I got to a point about 6 months ago where I effectively burnt out. I got a day job, I got a family, I got kids and all that sort of thing. So I was burning both ends of the candle to do a show every night. So I got sick, I got COVID coming back from Australia, and that sort of wiped me out for a while. And it's just been now that I've got back into it. And in that period of time, I came across you on Twitter and sort of started following you there, and then thought, oh, it'd be great to have a chat. And I'm not sure how, I found out that you were based in New Zealand like I am. So I was like, oh yeah, great, let's organise and have a chat. But what got you into onto Twitter and into war mapping and the Ukraine war and all that?
Well, I actually started off doing YouTube as well. I started off just making daily updates on the Ukraine war. I think I began back in early 2023. Before that, I'd just been watching YouTube videos on it every day, and that's what inspired me to do it. And then I guess one day I had this person who I only really ever had about 2 or 3 active viewers who consistently watched my videos. And one of the people who watched me recommended that I started making Twitter posts and then use that to grow my channel. And I sort of considered it, but I never really got into it until a few months later when I wouldn't say I got burnt out, but I got a bit bored of YouTube and the little game. I wasn't really making anything out of it, not money-wise, but like wasn't really getting any consistent viewers. And I felt that Twitter might be a good change, just to switch it up a bit, try something new. So I did that, and it went really well. And from there, I sort of evolved my mapping style, improved on things, and that's kind of what got me to here.
Yeah, nice. I've had similar experiences, I guess, with growing my channel. My channel's only small. I got to 1,000 subscribers 6 or 7 months ago, but Twitter was what I started using and pushing out just little videos and snippets, and from that, I got a bit of a, got a bit of a boost in terms of getting subscribers on the YouTube channel. I was also lucky with a couple of the guys in that Ukraine war space picked up on my videos and commented. Like one day I looked at one of my videos and got 1,000 views in an hour. I thought, hell, what happened there?
Oh wow!
And then I searched around and eventually found on Twitter, one of the guys there had said, hey, this guy, I like his shows, and he's got thousands of followers. So yeah, that was a good little boost there.
Good.
How much time do you spend on mapping? You seem to be online all the time.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm just finished. Well, I don't know if people know this, but I'm 18, so I'm just finishing up my last year of school. So I don't have lots and lots of time, but I have time afterwards where I can do my mapping. So maybe six-ish hours, if I had to guess, per day. It used to be a little bit more, but I've got exams coming up, so I have to work on that. But yeah, so probably around 6 hours per day on average, give or take a little bit.
That's pretty committed. That's a fair bit of time. Do you
yeah.
what are your main sources? I've used Telegram quite a lot in the past to get.
Yeah, I use that mostly.
Yeah. In terms of the Ukraine conflict, it's really good. I see that you do some posting too and some mapping on Israel. There is Telegram similarly good source for information there, or something else are you using?
Well, it took me a while to find all the sources that I needed for my mapping on Israel. It requires quite a bit of background research too. But Israel, once I learned a bit more about it, I guess I found some good sources. Telegram, I guess you could say it's quite similar to Ukraine for Israel. There's certain words you have to navigate around. You have to navigate past the propaganda from both sides. It's definitely takes time to filter out certain things in order to make a neutral report. But yeah, I'd say it's relatively similar. You just got to, it's just a little bit different to Ukraine.
You got to take the time to find the sources.
Yeah, you got to take the time to find the sources and filter out any misinformation.
Yeah, that's I don't know if it's a skill, but it's certainly a feeling that you either should grow over time or you need to have. It seems. Trying to report on things and you see something pop up and you just get that feel for it doesn't sound right. I'll leave it alone, and sure enough, 6 hours later you hear no, it was complete rubbish. So I left it alone.
And cross-checking with other sources too is important.
Yeah. What's your take on the current situation in Ukraine?
Well, in my opinion, I see Ukraine is currently losing ground every single day. They are losing support from the West. The military aid's gone down significantly. We're beginning to see the beginning of what I and other people see as the collapse. I think we're going to start to see significant advances in the near future, in the next 6 to 12 months, I'd say. And Ukraine is a very small, well, it's not very small, but it's much, much smaller than Russia. It can't keep up a war of attrition for long. I guess they don't have as many people as Russia, and there's a lot of other factors that come into play that just all point towards the same conclusion, that being Russia capturing at least half of Ukraine. And right now we're beginning to see that. So, for example, during the Battle of Avdiivka, I don't know if you remember, there was a small village. This is a village I like to go back to compare to the battles nowadays. A small village called Stepovia, and that village had a pre-war population of about 90, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if that's true, but and that village took roughly 3 or 4 months for Russia to capture. Now, when they went into the town of Novhorodivka, which is much further west in that area, it took them 3 days, and that town had a population of 14,000. So you can just see the real difference in how long it's taken for them to conquer some of these settlements, and it just reflects on the situation on the ground and how tired Ukraine is, how demoralized their army is. I've seen reports from soldiers on the ground basically saying the situation is really bad. It's looking worse and worse each day, essentially. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a very similar view on things, and based, I think, from the same area you're drawing your conclusions. And for a long time, I've felt this. Russia is a big country. They've got 140 million people. I think Ukraine started the conflict with maybe 37 million, something around there. They immediately lost a lot to the West. The conflict began, and a lot to Russia, and that number's just going down. And I agree. They just can't support the fight to the same extent that Russia can. And I think one of the big differences that gets missed by a lot of people who will say, "Oh, well, it's not just Ukraine fighting Russia; it's the whole West fighting Russia." But I think the difference there is that I believe Russia has adopted a real war footing and a war economy. Since 2008, Bucharest, NATO summit, they knew that the expansion into Ukraine was coming into Georgia, so they moved in. They made their attack into Georgia to stop that from happening. I think the Russians have been preparing for this for years and years, and you can't get the same level of preparation and commitment from the West, from someone like Germany or the UK or particularly the United States, where they're not under the same existential threat. They're not battling on their border. So their level of commitment has always been less than the level of commitment that I imagine the Russians are provided to give. Now, obviously, the Ukrainian commitment is very strong. They're fighting for their own country, of course, but them relying on Western backing has always been a risky move. If they had managed to overpower the Russians right at the start, but now I'm with you. I just see it continuing to be a accelerating grind westward by the Russians until they get to the Dnieper River, I suppose, and then I guess things like what happens in Kiev and what happens in Odessa. I guess that's going to be some of the bigger questions we'll see in the next little while.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I've seen on your Twitter handle that it's you're a Ukrainian supporter of the conflict. What's your take on the NAFO crowd?
Well, originally my stance was that they were just another group of pro-Ukrainians that were fighting for the same thing. Well, I say fighting, obviously, but cheerleading for the same thing I was at the time. And that was kind of when I was in my own little echo chamber. I was only really watching certain YouTubers that were pro-Ukrainian. And as I kind of started to leave that echo chamber, looked more into NAFO, their background, and I started to realize the real situation in Ukraine, and also certain beliefs that NAFO had that just didn't make any sense. And I started to voice those beliefs. That gained me a larger pro-Russian audience than most pro-Ukrainian accounts, and NAFO quickly caught on to that, and I'm like, hold on a second, this person's probably pro-Russian, even though I'm not. And they started a whole mass doxing and sort of harassment campaign against me, and that all happened back in May to June to July of this year, and that really hardened my stance on them, seeing them go after a fellow pro-Ukrainian, and it just didn't really make any sense to me. They can't have an argument or a discussion. All they do is fling insults and memes, and they can't have you can't have an intelligent conversation with them, essentially. Like, there's been a couple of people every now and then I find someone you can kind of talk to about stuff, disagree on things, respectfully disagree, but the vast majority of them are just impossible to talk to.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've sort of given up on Twitter now, arguing with NAFO, because for exactly those reasons, you just can't have a logical conversation with them. You just can't suggest something and say, challenge this if you don't believe it. You're right. You just get called a
Russian bot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the nicest of the names that you get called.
Yeah.
But actually, that was one of the things I noticed about you. When I actually saw you on Twitter and I saw one of your posts, I was like, I'll read that again because it's like Ukrainian colours. But I was like, that's a really sensible post. That's kind of realistic of what's happening, I think. And went back, and that's why I started to follow you. I thought, hey, this dude's actually good. You're saying you're pro-Ukrainian, but I think you've got a really balanced view of what's actually going on, which is difficult to find in that pro-Ukrainian space.
Yeah, and I guess that's also why a lot of neutrals and pro-Russians followed me for the same reason, because it contrasts. I guess I don't want to brag, but I kind of contrasted the rest of the pro-Ukrainian community, or most of it at least. I mean, there's definitely some others out there that I've met, and we've kind of made our own little community in a group DM, but it is rare to find other pro-Ukrainians that are realistic and have a realistic stance on the current situation. I agree.
Yeah. Have you? Obviously you have been, but have you followed the Kursk, the activity in Kursk over the last few months? Again, I'd interested to think, what's your take on that, or maybe what the objectives were, and then what the success of it has been.
Oh, well, I think the objectives were to. I think there were a couple of things that it could have been. One would have been to reach the Kurchatov nuclear power plant, and I think that was probably the lesser of the two most likely options. I think the most likely reason for it was to get support from the West, and I think the Ukrainian government at the time was convinced that if they get enough ammunition, if they get enough artillery, if they get enough support from the West, then they can essentially hold off the Russians for long enough to a point where Russia, I guess, just collapses. And I think they believed that at the time, but as Kursk has really started to show that it's not working and they're being pushed back every day, I think since then the Ukrainian government has begun to realize, and that's why they're sending reserves to Donetsk. Anyways, my point was that the reason I disagree with that is that Kursk, bringing military aid to Ukraine isn't going to solve the situation on the ground. They need men, they need manpower to solve it, and to come up to use the artillery, to basically to use any of the support. I guess they need manpower. And Kursk is only wasting that manpower, and that's one of the reasons why I don't support it, because they have lost thousands of men in doing so. I mean, the Russian Ministry of Defense claims 25,000. I don't really believe that, but I think it was definitely in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, and that has significantly deteriorated the situation in the east. And I just don't understand why they would make such a decision. It just makes no sense to me.
No, I think you're right. I think part of it is, Zelensky and the government there realise they need Western support to keep the fight going, and if they can do anything to sort of convince their backers that, hey, look, we're strong, we've got the Russians on the ropes, look, we've invaded into Russian territory, I think that was a big part of it. And also, yeah, I agree. I would say whether it was a real goal, it would have been a target to get to the Kursk nuclear power plant, because had they done that and been able to hold it, that's a real bargaining chip of some sort. If they were to say, look, let's call a ceasefire, we'll agree to negotiate, but we'll give you this back and you give us the Energodar one back in Zaporozhye region, or whatever. But I think a big part of it was, like you said, just trying to get themselves back onto the front pages in the Western papers with something positive. But yeah, I think any way you look at it, dreadful result. Seems like a lot of really good seasoned troops have been lost in Kursk. There's been some reports that I've seen talking about the defences and spending in areas west of Donetsk, where basically it seems as though there's been some level of corruption where money was distributed and there should have been defensive positions built, and they haven't been built, or they have, and they've been of very low quality. That, I think, has got to be very tough for the Ukrainian forces as they're now being pushed west in the Donetsk region towards Zaporozhye, as you're saying before, going from taking months to take a town to now capturing it in days. It feels as though instead of advancing into Kursk, the Ukrainians might have been better served to send some of those troops back behind the lines and build defensive positions and try to hold things off longer, perhaps.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the issue with one of the main issues in the East is morale. I've heard from people on the front line, just sources on the front line, that a lot of the soldiers fighting in the Pokrovsk direction are actually from Pokrovsk, interestingly. And they are seeing they're seeing themselves being pushed back every single day towards their homes, towards their families, towards their livelihoods. They're seeing their city being destroyed, and that's going to be a terrible hit on morale. And when they see that those defenses are bad, terrible quality too, it's going to be an even worse hit on morale when they realize that the Ukrainian government isn't really doing anything. I mean, I can kind of imagine it would feel like they're a bit abandoned. They probably feel a bit abandoned, to be honest. It's just when they sent all those troops away to Kursk for a PR campaign and to get money from the US, those troops defending the Donbass, who've been defending it for over 10 years now, must feel pretty abandoned.
Yeah. And I think things are only going to get worse. I mean, the economy in Ukraine, this is another thing that, again, when I've tried to sort of discuss this with some of the NAFO crowd online, is just for a year or more now, Russia has been inflicting almost daily missile and drone strikes across Ukraine. So the ability for Ukraine to power things up, to produce and to run industry, to generate weapons, to just run even normal business is severely hampered. So that's having a massive detrimental impact upon their economy. No one's wanting to invest in Ukraine at the moment. People will be looking to leave because quality of life is going to drop. So the morale is just going to be sinking on all fronts. It's not as though everything's rosy and they're just being pushed back in one region. Even if they did somehow, the Russians today said, okay, we're going to stop right now where we are, then the Ukrainian economy is still in really bad shape for years, if not decades to come. It's a really terrible situation for the Ukrainians. I don't know. Have you read or watched any of John Mearsheimer's work?
I have read some of it about 6 months ago, or was it Cohen? I get those two mixed up. But
so Mearsheimer's a political scientist, and he's known as a realist. He's the person who, back in 2008, said you don't want Ukraine to join NATO.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
because he said, look, the US are going to lead them up the primrose path. They will just say, lie and say you can have everything you want and we'll support you all the way. You go and fight the Russians on our behalf. And that seems to be exactly what has happened. And now, the country's just being wrecked. And while the current Zelensky government stays in power and doesn't negotiate, I think we're going to reach a point where the Russians will just say, well, we're driving all the way to the Dnieper River and everything east of the Dnieper will become Russia. At that point, they might say, well, that's enough. I don't think the Russians want all of Ukraine. I don't think the Russians have ever wanted to take all of Ukraine. I think over the course of the war, they've decided that those more Russian-aligned oblasts, the eastern ones, I think they've changed their mind there and said, yeah, they are all going to become Russia now. But I don't imagine they would go past the Dnieper. Apart from Odessa, if I was Putin and the Russians, I would look to take Odessa just to stop Ukraine having access to the Black Sea so as to stop any future threat of them, sort of rearming through the ocean and causing the problem again. It's if I'm strategically putting myself into Putin's shoes. I think that Odessa is probably on the table for Russia to take as well. Plus, it lets them hook up with Transnistria on the corner of Moldova. And again, there's been some rumblings in the last week or so that maybe the Ukrainians would look to embark into Transnistria to cause Putin some grief that way, because he's got, there's 1,000 or 1,500 Russian soldiers, I think.
2 battalions, I think.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of see that as a logical end point where you've connected up Russia all the way across to Transnistria. But, well, I guess we'll wait and see. It'll be interesting in about 3 weeks' time when the American election has happened and we see who's won that and then what happens. Because I know a number of people feel that the West is currently wanting to supply Ukraine to keep them from not falling apart until early January, when the inauguration of the next president will take place. Because if it is Trump, I think they're fairly certain that support for Ukraine will drop off. Trump sort of intimated that he's never been as interested as Biden, and he's very, very pro-Israeli, so his focus will be turning to supporting the Israelis. So there's all those people like Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin and Biden, who they don't want Ukraine to collapse on their watch. So if they can keep enough support going that they get through the election, they get past January, that's where we might, I think, see a real drop-off in support and even a real change in terms of just political messaging from the West. It's still very positive. We'll support you, but that may even change come January.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. I guess I don't know if Zelensky knows about it. If he knows that the US is kind of using them, it'd be interesting to know that.
I figure he's got to by now.
He has to.
Yeah.
It's just he's always thanking them in statements. I guess those are just public statements, but still, you would think he would be, considering his country's at stake, he would be saying a little bit more.
Look, obviously I don't know. I've never been to Ukraine, but
yeah, neither.
From a number of sources I've heard, it sounds like he's between a rock and a hard place. He's got some very strong nationalists, national Ukrainians, really supporters of Ukraine, who apparently don't want him to stop the fighting. They want to keep on fighting the Russians, and some of them have got a lot of money and power and influence, and they have militia and whatever behind them. So I think he's in a position where if he stops, he's worried that they might come after him. And on the other hand, if he doesn't stop, he'll probably get pushed to a point where negotiation sort of becomes a moot point, because Russia has pushed all the way to the Dnieper and say, well, we'll stop now. We've had enough. And, I think it's a tough situation. But I think he has to know that he's become a proxy and he's being played by the US.
Yeah, he probably does. I'm just surprised he isn't saying anything. He is saying some things, but not enough, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess, look, that's the game, though. He has to be careful there, because he can't say too much bad against the West, or they'll just say, okay, you're out, get rid of you, we'll get someone else, we don't like listening to you anymore, and then it might all stop, or at least for him it might all stop. And there's also, look, I have no idea how much money he's making, but if there's, billions of dollars being sent to Ukraine, there's a lot of that, I'm sure, going into a back pocket. And once this is over, if he manages to navigate his way out of it without being liquidated by the right or by the West for some reason, then I'm sure he's going to have a big home in Monaco or somewhere after this. So, I do wonder how much he might want to keep the fight going, just because he's become power hungry and, drunk on the power and the money. That's what they say, ultimate power corrupts ultimately. He's gone from being a TV actor to major player on the international stage with billions of dollars coming in under his control. You mightn't want to give that up.
Yeah, I guess it just depends how much he loves his country.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. So just going back to what you were saying before, so it was the NAFO community who doxed you. It wasn't like a pro-Russian group or something.
No, it was a NAFO group. It was a pro-Ukrainian group doxing a pro-Ukrainian. Yep, they've done it before too. I don't know if you know Osint Defender.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was doxed back in 2023 for a similar reason.
You're right. And so what did they do? They found out your personal details and just plastered that around the internet, did they?
Thankfully they didn't find my address, but they were able to. One of them could have. I was a minor at the time, so I think they were a bit worried about if they did find my address putting it out there. But they found my my old website, pretty close to where I lived. They found my age, my full name, all of that kind of stuff. And some more videos of me. And yeah, they just put it around places, started editing my face to like Kadyrov. Just all sorts of random stuff. It was quite funny actually. It was a bit nerve-wracking at first, but then when I realized nothing was really going to come of it, it was quite funny.
Oh shit. Yeah, no, that's no good. I don't know. I got a heads up from a couple of guys on Twitter a few months ago that I needed to look out, because apparently on Twitter there was a mass reporting of my account. Nothing ever came of it, but I don't know how these guys knew, but they said, yeah, look, all the NAFO crowd are trying to get you shut down and booted off Twitter. So I was actually away camping at the time. I sort of had a bit of a laugh. I told my wife, I was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe I've pissed these guys off enough, because it's not like I'm a rah-rah pro-Russian supporter. I'm like you. I just try and sort of call it as I see it more than anything else. I don't see much point in sugarcoating it and saying, yeah, Ukraine's going to win. Because if anyone asks you why or how, I'd be like, I'm just making it up, because really it doesn't look that way at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
What about Israel? What's your thinking on what's going to happen there with the recent assassinations of Hamas leader Sinwar and the Hezbollah leader Nasrallah and the Iranian attack? Are you following that as closely as you're following Ukraine?
Not as closely as Ukraine, but I have been following it more than I was a few months ago. I sort of think we might see a similar situation to Ukraine, but over a much longer, extended period of time, because Israel has the support of the US. The US is incredibly invested in Israel. It is their bastion of quote unquote democracy and freedom in the Middle East. So I think they're a lot more invested and have a much more vested interest in supporting Israel than they do Ukraine, because they've got all of NATO in Europe. But Middle East they got Saudi Arabia and Jordan, but they're not the same as Israel is to the US. So I think we're going to see over the next decade, we're going to see Israel begin to make more and more enemies. They're going to radicalize the Palestinian population even more than it already is. Because the thing is, Israel thinks they're getting rid of the Palestinian quote-unquote problem, but what they're actually doing is they're radicalizing a whole new generation of Palestinian children who are seeing their families killed. They're seeing all their relatives die, and they're just going to grow up to hate Israel, and they're going to grow up to hate Jews, and they're going to grow up to hate the West, and they're going to grow up fighting Israel, and Israel's going to create more problems for itself as it finds more enemies in different countries. And Israel's also not a very big country, so if they were to face off against Iran, which has over 80 million people, Israel has about 9 million, I think. I can't quite remember the exact number.
I think about 7. Yeah.
Oh, is it 7? Okay. And they can't win in a war against Iran. They can't even beat Hezbollah, which isn't even a military. It's a militant group. Yeah. So, and they can't even beat Hamas. Like, there's no way they could survive in a war against a major power like Iran. And I think we're going to see in the next decade a direct war between Israel and Iran.
Yeah, I've got some concerns that we're going to see a major war there. I think we're also going to see one in Europe. So I'll come back to Israel in a minute, but just taking this topic back to where we were. If, as we say, if Ukraine is losing, and I feel that they are losing, and I don't think it's something that they can stop. I think that's going to happen. But what that means then is that this is it's a really bad look for NATO and all those NATO nations. So my concern is that they're going to say, well, we need to justify ourselves. Like, we weren't able to get together and support Ukraine. We failed there. If we want to keep getting funding from our countries, we need to justify our existence as a defensive organisation. And the concern is that they really then turn up the propaganda machine to say, look, Russia is really coming. They're already doing it. There's already talk about it. But, Russia is really, really coming, so that they can arm themselves. And if they do manage to swindle the people and arm themselves over the next coming couple of years and turn up their percentage of GDP they pay for military spending each year, then Russia's going to say, well, you guys are just building up to war against us, so we'll just keep on building up. And ultimately, that will come to a European war. The same thing is building in Israel, although I feel like the safety switch or the difference there might be that Israel might just have made a really big mistake and might get into a fight, like you say, with Iran and just lose really badly. And again, I know that the US are the big supporters of them. However, if it gets into a missile fight, and let's just exclude the possibility of anyone going nuclear, not that won't happen, but let's just exclude it for this conversation. If it's a big missile fight, we know that the stocks of interceptor missiles aren't an inexhaustible supply. So Iran just keeps on sending missiles and drones into Israel. Eventually, the Israelis run out of interceptor missiles to protect their military bases, to protect their energy infrastructure, whatever it might be. And then you say, okay, well, the US will support them with their aircraft carriers. They've got 11 aircraft carriers, yeah, but they've only ever got about 3 or 4 that are operational at any time. And in the back of my mind is the fact that up over the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, there's always a pair of MiG-31s flying around with hypersonics. And, if Russia decided they were joining Iran to support them, then I just don't see how that isn't a risk to the US that they could lose their carriers, in the aircraft carriers, in an instant, which then means that Israel loses the support of the hundreds of fighter jets and missiles that are on those aircraft carriers. And if that happens, then you're into a major world war in the Middle East as well. I don't see a good way out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only good way out of it would be a new government coming into power in Israel.
Yes. And a year ago, with no knowledge of domestic Israeli politics, but a year ago I could have said that might have happened. So I remember when I was doing some reporting back then on Netanyahu's position, he was unliked because of his corruption charges that are ongoing. And I remember at the time speaking about the fact that he wouldn't want to give up on this war, because once the war stops, then all those corruption cases come back onto him. But it seems now that with time that has changed, and that now he's become a popular war leader. So I don't know, like getting a government in there, I get the feeling that the risk might be that even if Bibi leaves, that his replacement might be even more war hawkish than he is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one hope would be that Israel, I mean, this is just my opinion, I think if Israel doesn't respond to the Iranian attack significantly, and they lose the support of the rest of the far right, and they lose the support of the right as a whole, they've already lost they never really had the support of the liberals in the beginning, and the leftists, but if they lose the support of their main supporters in the right wing supporters, he might not be able to survive the next election.
Yeah.
And because Israel is a democracy, and that's one of their weaknesses. I mean, I support democracy, but it is a weakness for Israel. They will, the people will ultimately choose whether they want a war, and unless Netanyahu pulls a Zelensky and cancels elections, then I don't see how he can stay in if he doesn't respond.
Yeah, look, you're right. I feel what it might take, though, is some more pressure on the Israeli population. Like, it might take some sustained missile strikes from Iran for a while for them to start to turn on him and say, look, you're not protecting us. We're getting, people are dying now. We need to stop this. We're only 7 million people. We can't win this fight. But I don't think he's anywhere near that stage yet. I don't think the population is there yet. But they could get there, I guess, with that sort of pressure from Iran. There was, I was watching some reports earlier today, talk that perhaps the retaliation that Israel will look to inflict upon Iran is going to be, they're going to try to do another sort of like assassination attempt on Iranian leaders, like they've done with Hamas and Hezbollah. That might be what the approach is going to be, rather than necessarily a big military strike trying to take out Iranian military bases or trying to take out Iranian nuclear enrichment sites. Instead, they're going to go after the leadership. But if they do, it's to me, that's exactly like you were saying before. It will backfire, because by taking out the top command of the Iranian military and the political sphere, it's not going to be a problem. They'll just be replaced by people who are equally as strongly supported of the Iranian cause underneath them, who will just take over, and it will have inflamed all of those others, the younger generation, to make them more dislike Israel.
It's just martyrdom, I guess.
Yeah, but if that is the approach, if that's what we see, some strikes like that, then there's not going to be any de-escalation. If the Israelis said, all right, we're going to go out, we're going to strike some military bases, but it'll be restrained. If that happened, they could say, look, we've replied. In between, they could be negotiating in the background with the Iranians, and the Iranians go, okay, that wasn't too bad, we won't strike back now. Maybe we'd find some way out of it. But if this talk is correct, that they want to go after the leadership in Iran, then we're not looking at de-escalation. It's just going to go up again.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it may even arguably be worse than targeting their oil facilities.
Mm. Yeah. I'm trying. I had a couple of questions written down that I was thought I was asking you, and I think I've almost gone through them all. Yeah, pretty much. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about in terms of what's happening in Ukraine? Or
Well, I didn't write anything down, but I guess, or touching back on what you said about the whole situation with Russia potentially going for cities along the Dnieper River. My only thought for what might cause Russia to struggle with that, I still think they'll be able to reach the river, but I do think they will, which is one of the reasons why I think they will take up to 2.5, maybe 3 years to reach the river, is for two main reasons. One, open fields are perfect for FPV ambushes and all that kind of stuff. But the main reason is the civilian population outside of Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk, and even Kharkiv. The civilian population from those cities is quite anti-Russian, and I know this because I'm in a lot of local Telegram channels and local Telegram group chats, and since Telegram's so uncensored and it's got such wide freedom of speech, I think you can get a pretty accurate representation of how the local population feels about Russia, and the vast majority of the messages in those group chats and the vast majority of the posts on those Telegram channels are all anti-Russia and anti-war. They don't like Zelensky, but they're also against the Russian invasion, and they very all the, you know how in Telegram we have the emojis at the reactions, most of them are probably at least 90% of them are all angry emojis every time Russia attacks a building or attacks something. So I guess just from that, and also the comment sections and the messages and the chatter, I've kind of concluded that it'll be difficult for Russia to suppress the civilian population. Not undoable. I definitely think it's possible and likely.
I agree with you. And
yeah.
And this is something like John Mearsheimer says. He talks about Russia trying to take the oblasts west of the Dnieper as swallowing a hedgehog. He said, you just don't want to do it. Yeah,
especially in Lviv.
Hey?
Especially in Lviv.
I honestly don't think the Russians have any intention of going west of the Dnieper at all. For the exact reasons you said. It's funny, I've looked at some graphs and charts of polls taken of Ukraine, and it's things like, do you prefer the West or do you prefer Russia? And it slides on a gradient like this across the country. As you move closer to Russia, people like Russia more. As you move further towards Poland, people like the West more. It's very much so. The eastern side of Ukraine is quite strongly Russian speaking and Russian supporting. The western side, Ukrainian, Western supporting. Going past the Dnieper, I don't think would happen. But you brought up an interesting point on the FPV drones. It's been amazing, the pace of evolution of drone technology that the war has driven over the last 2.5 years, how long it's been going on. Like seeing initially drones going up, which were spotter drones, and then seeing some going up carrying some warheads or grenades on them, and then some going up which were suicide drones, and now seeing drones which are like an enforcer drone who are accompanying other ones, and these ones are armed with a shotgun so that they can attempt to take out enemy drones that might take out your drone. If this continues in the next few years, we'll just have aerial drone warfare going on. Everyone on the ground will just give up and go about their daily job and just watch the drones fight it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the thermite drones, that's the other one. Yeah, they're dropping thermite on Russian positions, forest positions.
Those thermite ones, the dragon breath ones, or whatever they're
called. Yeah.
And, again, this is going back probably a year now to Krinky down in Kherson, where they came out, I think it was the first ones that came out with night vision. So I remember reading from some Ukrainian guys on Telegram going, well, this is just fucking horrible. We've gone from being hit by drones all day, and now it's all day and all night because they can see at night. Yeah.
It's pretty bad for both sides there with drones. Yeah, I've seen some combat footage where literally you're having to look ahead of you, next to you, and above you at all times, trying to concentrate on so many different things at once. I can only imagine how difficult and tiring it must be to constantly be making sure nothing's coming at you from all directions, including above, and keeping your ears open for any sounds of drones, and we're not sure whether they're friendly drones or your drones, having to shoot down enemy drones, distinguish against the friendly drones so you don't shoot down your own drone. Like it's I can only imagine how difficult it must be and how much training that must take.
Oh, it must be. That's why blokes get shell shock and things like that. They just
can't
handle it, just crack up and shoot themselves or just go nuts and run off or whatever it might be. But you completely understand it day in, day out of that. And like you say, and just, you read reports where they're talking about maybe the Russians are pushing into a township or a city, and they're saying there's just constantly 15 or 20 drones in the sky. Not sure whose, but they're everywhere. You just can't put your head up, or one will be after you. You see video footage of single soldiers on the ground swinging their rifle at a drone that's coming to blow them up, or they're already injured and they're being struck by them. It's terrible. Just can't imagine how horrible that must be. The drone war. And again, the evolution. So, the counter warfare, the electronic warfare countermeasures has grown to such an extent that I saw some footage last week of a tank going down the road, a drone approaching the tank, a pickup truck coming around a corner behind the tank, which had all the EW gear on it, and the drone just flew straight over the top of it and hit the tank because this was a fibre optic one. So for exactly the reason that there's countermeasures in electronic warfare space which are jamming the drones, they're now sending them out with a reel of fibre optic cable so they can control them directly. Over, I don't know how much range they got, a kilometre maybe, but just constant evolution.
Electronic warfare can just be like a game of cat and mouse, really, constantly changing your frequencies, and it's I guess I wonder if there's ever going to be a new evolution in technology that allows you to counter all the electronic warfare. You can only imagine what could happen in the future.
In the future, I guess anything's possible. We continue amazingly to evolve and improve in technology. Every year you look ahead and go, "Oh no, this must be getting to the end. We can't do more than this," and then we do more than that.
Yeah,
quantum technology, things like that, they may play a big impact in that area. But even other drones, I've seen that have been interesting. I've seen a few land drones, just. I saw, this is going back a little while down the conflict, but one which was just four knobby tyres, a battery body in the middle, and a arm with a hook on it, and they were using it as a medic, and they're just driving it out into no man's land, and this hook was just like going clunk onto one of their injured guys' jackets or belts, just catching on somewhere, and they were just dragging them back to safety.
And like the net drones, the ones where they shoot nets and catch the enemy drones to shoot them down. It's just so many types now.
And what has got to come soon? I mean, you would have seen the footage of in Singapore and China where they're having the celebrations and there's like 1,000 drones in the sky. Well, once they become all military drones, all carrying a grenade or whatever they're doing, half of them are doing different tasks, and they come into a position, your survivability goes to zero. I don't see, unless you've got some sort of counter electronics which can shut them down so they can't find you. But if you can't, then I think it's all over. the other thing too, of course, those is it Boston Dynamics who first did the dogs, the four-legged dogs, and there's the Chinese, the yellow version of those. Those things getting guns mounted on them now. I saw from China the other day. I believe this was real. I don't think this was just AI footage. I think this was a real demonstration of some technology they're working on. They were basically a big metal ball, like about a meter, maybe meter 20 diameter, which was able to roll around, and they had three of them, and on either side of them they had some sort of technology, and one of the things they had here was nets. They could throw out nets, and no doubt they could have guns. But they showed a guy with a baseball bat running along, and three of these things just rolling around after him, and you're like, well, there's no way I can get away from them. It's like Terminator.
Yeah, and AI.
Yeah.
AI will play a big role.
Oh, yeah. Are you using AI for anything that you do at this stage?
Not yet, no. Oh yeah, I saw a thing that, going back to drones, I saw a Ukrainer's, I don't know if you saw this, Ukrainer's developing a drone called the Sting drone, which flies up, like not directly up, but just flies up on an angle to intercept Jiran drones or Shahed drones. Oh. And they're 10 times, they cost 10 times less, and they can, and they are, I think, 180 kilometers an hour or something, and they can go up to 4 kilometers in the sky, and they just knock out the Jiran drones, and it's those, we might see drones intercepting drones in the future.
Oh yeah, it's just like life. It's evolution. You
exactly.
Know, different fish attack other types of fish, or this type of drone only attacks that type of drone.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Oh yeah, it'll go on. And yeah, look, AI. I mean, again, this is going back probably to the start of 2023. I was reading that the Russians had their first ever aircraft shot down by their S-350 air defense system in its fully autonomous mode. So it was AI controlling it, tracking a target, choosing to fire it, and hitting the target. So all those things are starting to be incorporated already. But just I was actually I was on LinkedIn and watching a little video from a colleague of mine that I used to work with. He was talking about, he's been working with AI and was working with like journalists to basically, I think, send AI out to the net to find a whole heap of news sources, and then based on some goals that they had, I think what they were looking for was new news, unique and new things that were interesting and not older news. They were using the AI to go out, find that, do a whole heap of weighting, and then bring back links to those sources. And that's, I was thinking about that and going, for someone like you who's like researching, taking a lot of information from different sources, I was thinking in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder how you can make that work to sort of help, go and scour Telegram and come up with stuff which is new and has already been checked against 2 or 3 other sources, so it sort of floats to the top and says, yeah, look, I'm pretty confident this is a real story, this one, you should follow it. So
yeah, and especially with getting like 5 to 10,000 Telegram messages per day, like that'd be so useful.
Yeah. So yeah, something like that. I play with it a bit for on the Deep 404, I've used it for ages for just generating YouTube thumbnails. I would just, rather than me trying to be a graphic designer and create some image or necessarily stealing someone else's, I would just use AI to create something. That's pretty cool. I use it a little bit for some of my other work too. In drafting, if I've got to write a bunch of text somewhere, I might throw it an idea and say, this is kind of what I want. Let it do the bulk of the work and come back to it and go, yeah, that's pretty good. And I'll take a chunk out of it here and there, and that sort of thing. I remember the first time I played with it at my work, like a year ago when ChatGPT came out. My boss at the time, she was asking me, we were putting together some presentation, and she was saying, look, I need some text. Can you write something for here? And so she didn't realize it, but I was going, sure, ChatGPT, tell me how to blah, 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 blah. And I'd fire it straight back at her like a minute later, and she's like, oh, that's good. Can you do them for this section? And after about 5 of these, I was thinking to myself,
pretty soon she's got a twig that I don't really type this quickly. Yeah. Cool. Oh, well, look, hey, man, hey, this has been fun. Look, really, thanks for coming and chatting. If you're interested and you want to do this in the future, I'm happy to maybe make it like a bit of a semi-regular thing if you want to get together and do a bit of a weekly catch-up and talk about what's going on, but it's up to you. See how you feel.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah. We'll have to find times to do it, but because I've got exams coming up, but I definitely will. Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Oh, yeah, also, awesome, man. We can figure that out offline then, so... But we'll catch up and talk again soon. But, yeah, thanks. I hope you kind of enjoyed having a chat. I did. I think it was good fun.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Nice.